Hi, welcome to Sacred Spaces. I'm Laura Kelly and today we're here with Shelley Penn. Shelley, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Laura.
Now, you're an architect, but you've picked a bit of an unusual sacred space for us today in that it's not a building we're looking at, it's actually a whole laneway, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if I think of sacred space, often we think of particular rooms or buildings, but more often, when I started to think about what appealed to me, they're more often landscapes, and so whether it's a cliff overlooking a beach or a particular beach I have in mind, or an urban landscape like this one, it's where it's sort of more complex. But I kind of think about space as continuous anyway, whether it's a room or a garden or a room within a house, within a suburb, it's all connected, and so the landscape appealed to me.
So Shelley, describe where we're actually standing right now.
Okay, so we're just right at the very top of Flinders Lane and on the edge of Spring Street, which is one of the edges of the Hoddle Grid, which really defines Melbourne's urban form. And Flinders Lane is the first of the secondary lanes up from Flinders Street, which is the southern edge of the grid. And as such, it's important because it's the beginning of the lane, and it wanders down from the Fitzroy Gardens over there all the way down to Spencer Street, which you can sort of just about see in the distance. It's an important lane because it is so close to the edge of the grid and the river's edge that it's been a centre for trade. I mean, there was warehousing and a lot of port activity, which down at the other end of Flinders Lane used to occur, and so there's a lot of the history of the place is embedded in its actual physical location in the grid.
Well, let's get started and have a bit of a wander through the laneways and see what it reveals.
Okay, great.
So Shelley, we've walked a little way into Flinders Lane and we're standing in front of Milton House now, is that right?
Yeah, Milton House. It is beautiful. It's actually quite a good example of Art Nouveau, and it was built, I think, 1901, and it's also interesting because it's had a mix of uses. It was originally built as a hospital, and I think it's been used as a rooming house and then as government offices. But it's also flanked by, a mix of other buildings, residential buildings, and then buildings that were warehouses. And it's quite interesting, and this strip in particular is interesting because it really displays the mix of perhaps more subversive uses that you get in the secondary lanes that you don't get in the main streets of Melbourne, where it's sort of back of house. There's the back of Collins Place here. The rents are a bit cheaper, so you can have not-for-profit organisations like 45 downstairs, which is gallery and performance, but great little interesting cafes. And in some ways, Milton House, as an example of that mix of uses, kind of sets it up for that range of different things going on.
Well, we'll explore some more, so let's get going.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we've come to quite a loud location here. What does this sort of say to you about Flinders Lane and the city of Melbourne itself?
It says a lot about the city as an incredibly vibrant place that's always growing and changing, but also about heritage. And we're just outside the Adelphi Hotel, and then the building next to a beautiful old building that's, operates as a gallery, as a jeweller's workshop, as a place where people live. The Adelphi is a fantastic conversion, not contemporary now, it's probably almost 20 years old, but it's clearly, this modern thing, and it fits beautifully and it's really responsive to the history. And there's a new building going on behind us. If that's done really well, it'll draw on the old buildings and the scale of the place and just add to the layers of sort of meaning and heritage. So I like it because it's about this growing thing, and that's what the heritage of Flinders Lane is about, but the city generally, it's this layers of meaning and time and experience.
And it's not just layers of meaning in terms of this very staid kind of history that we think about, but as well for you think about the way that we use these spaces and your personal stories, other people's personal stories, all kind of tying together into one space.
Absolutely. I mean, this strip is interesting too because it was the home of the rag trade for a long time, and I think it was known as the Lane. It was everybody in fashion industry, for example, knew this was the place where a lot of innovative new fashion houses were operating from. Before that, it was warehousing for a lot of manufacturers and rag trade. There was Maria's Bee beads actually was just a few doors up there, and they used to have every possible bead you could imagine. But so there's those sorts of things, and a lot of people have memories and they lived and worked here. But I have personal memories. I lived just down Hosier Lane for a couple of years, and so that's important to me. But I think our individual memories, as well as all those collective memories and different experiences, change how we see and experience these places, and they're part of why different uses pop up and why different people come here, and that's part of the heritage as well.
Well, there's one more spot I would love you to show us through, which is a sneaky little view of St Paul's that perhaps people have walked past and haven't noticed.
Absolutely.
Would you mind showing us?
Of course, fantastic.
We can still hear the sounds of modern Melbourne getting made behind us, but we've also got this incredible historical view that we're standing in front of. What are we in front of here?
We're actually at the back of St Paul's Cathedral, which is a really beautiful cathedral, and this is chapter house, and partly that's obviously still used for St Paul's and their functions and so on, but there's little shop fronts that have been allowed to take those spaces, and they're really quite gorgeous. But what's also beautiful is this little walkway that a lot of people don't know about, and you can just pop through there down into the back of St Paul's and across to Fed Square. And I really like that because it's unexpected, and I think it's part of the experience of these little back lanes. And in fact, we've walked past lots of little tiny lanes that we haven't gone down, and it's the little threaded network of lanes. Melbourne's quite famous for it, but this is a particular set of lanes, and there's many more further down as well.
Now, what are some of the other, as stretching down along Flinders Lane, we eventually get to Spencer Street and kind of pop out that end, don't we?
Yeah.
What else is along the way there?
Well, lots. You need to walk the whole thing, but I'm just looking what we can see from here. Places like the Nicholas Building on Swanston Street is a beautiful building, and it's a great example of how old buildings can be adaptively reused, but also occupied, and in that case it's by creative people of all sorts of persuasions who've sort of taken advantage of what was with cheap rent at the time, and have really enlivened that place, which gives a character. Just beyond that, there's places like De Grave Street, which is also famous, fantastic coffee, but just a great mix of interesting places, beautiful character. Mallorca House is just across the road there, and that's beautiful. Keep going down, there are examples all the way along. I think we've got one of our oldest pubs, Tavistock House, is further on down. You get down to sort of the legal end, and at the very end, as you say, Spencer Street is truncated by the old railways building that was converted almost 20 years ago to a hotel. And that's another great example of how an old building that was empty for a long time and was really quite a seedy, leftover, miserable place has become really lively, and that's the end of the grid. And when you pop out, you then find places like Southern Cross Station, which is just this fabulous new civic gesture, and lots more activity, and lots.
There's so much, isn't there? It's been so fantastic to get a couple of little sneak peeks. Obviously we can't cover it all, but it really does give us a bit of a feel for almost the city being dissected by this amazing little laneway and all these incredible little things happening.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it is a journey, literally a physical one, but there's also a sort of a demographic journey, and it is a landscape, and I think that's why it's sacred to me. It's got this layers of meaning and experience, and all sorts of people have different experiences of it, and that's what makes it special.
Well, thank you so much for sharing it with us today, Shelley.
It's a pleasure, Laura.